Wow, thank you to all the incredible leaders for telling us their stories of change. We heard about the Free to Menstruate cycle, rather campaign, the importance of us utilizing our voices within social media and media communications overall. And I'm really reminded of that African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go
Go
together.
together.
We're really getting the message loud and clear. Change is possible when we come together with others, collaborating across multiple domains. And we're just so pleased to see all the amazing things that you're doing. But of course, to all our audience members, please do share your stories with us using the hashtag 1.8 billion.
Of course. You know, one thing that I was particularly interested by in the plenary session we just saw there was this whole idea of news being a conversation. You know, my background coming from news, quite often I feel like people can forget that news isn't just a reporter talking to
Right.
the audience, but actually it should be this collaborative space where, you know, there is a bit of dialogue and there is a bit of conversation. So that was super interesting to me. But now it is over to another crew who are making a big noise. Now check this out. They're a metal band from Indonesia. So get ready to make some moves. They are the voice of Bachaprot.
Can't hold my tears when I see a girl crying. She lost her trust to the world and to the source of her love. Where did the kind angel go? Where she needed it so bad. Lord, the angel's gone, but I won't be silent when she's dead. Our body's there, public property. Don't let go, dirty mind. Our body's there, public property. Don't let go, sex is mine. Everyone has a right to live safely, but why the people now red? They are still busy talking about dressing appropriately. Because we are forced to obey by unwritten rules, and we are tired of this. That people say to be cool, say to be cool. This is how the world will be remembered, and this is how the world gets stronger and louder. This is how the world will be remembered, and this is how the world gets stronger and louder. This is how the world will be remembered, and this is how the world gets stronger and louder. This is how the world will be remembered, and this is how the world gets stronger and louder. Public property, no less for the dirty mind. Our bodies there, public property, no less for the sex is mine. No best one, dirty mind. No best one, dirty mind. No best one, dirty mind. No best one.
Whoa, they have some energy. Absolutely love that. And what an important message as well. Well, now we're going to Michelle Bachelet, former president of Chile and long-standing champion of adolescent health and well-being.
Hello, everyone. Taking part of this Global Forum for Adolescents. Wherever you are in the world, whether you are a youth activist or a policymaker, a health professional, journalist, or a student. And a big, loud thank you to Voice of Basheprot for that amazing performance. I was almost literally blown away by the energy and passion of your music. Basheprot, it sounds quite like my own name, means noisy in the Sandanese language. And this is important because we all have to be more noisy. I'm so impressed by the noise being generated here by so many youth and adolescents, not only those of you who are speakers, but by the poets, singers, visual artists, dancers, and drummers. Yes, it is wonderful for us all to be together in this rich, diverse, and creative mix, but it's also powerful to hear each other, to learn from each other, to be inspired by each other. During the 2 packed days of this Global Forum for Adolescents, we're witnessing the culmination of years of hard work on the part of so many committed people in so many different countries. I want to congratulate all of those who have worked so hard to bring it together, especially those who have good news of progress to inspire us. This work is not easy. I know from my own experience and from the history of my country and many others that the struggle for our freedoms is the most important struggle in our lives. These freedoms include our rights to choose what happens to our bodies, our right to a voice at political decision-making tables, our right to dignity, respect, equality. I also know from my own life and from the challenges which face so many activists that to stand up to reclaim your power can be risky. When we demand our rights, it can feel like we are faced with overwhelming forces, and it takes immense courage to do so. And this is why solidarity is so important. If we work together, we can succeed. What I'm seeing at this Global Forum for Adolescents is that we are united by the belief in our common goals. And as I said to you, adolescents and youth who have contributed so much to this event, that if you stay united and you continue rising, you continue leading, then you can be whatever you want to be. The world is yours, be noisy and take it.
Thanks to Michelle Bachelet, a legend and an inspiration. And now we have 2 great course sessions for you to choose from. These are about some huge risks faced by young people all over the world. The first is on the topic of substance abuse, and the title is A Healthy Dose of Change, Reducing Harm Through Youth-Driven Drug Education Solutions. And of course, we have a second one that's all about the awful toll of road traffic injuries, which claim lives every 2 minutes somewhere in the world. That session is called Driving Change, Youth Engagement for Improved Road Safety. But first, more 1.8 news with coverage from global events.
Unite! Unite! Rise! Lead! Lead!
हेलो, मेरा नाम है विशाल कश्यप और मैं रिपोर्ट कर रहा हूं दिल्ली, इंडिया से 1.8 न्यूज़ के लिए। सेंटर फॉर कैटलाइजिंग चेंज यानी C3 व्हाट यंग पीपल वांट कैंपेन के द्वारा इंडिया के 11 स्टेट्स से 1,30,000 से भी ज़्यादा रिस्पॉन्सेस कलेक्ट कर चुका है। और आज यानी 6 अक्टूबर को C3 इवेंट कर रहा है दिल्ली स्कूल ऑफ सोशल वर्क के स्टूडेंट्स के साथ। सो लेट्स फाइंड आउट व्हाट इंडियाज यंग पीपल वांट।
तो जब हम यंगस्टर्स के चैलेंजेस या प्रॉब्लम की बात करते हैं तो सबसे पहली चीज़ है डिजिटल डिवाइड की। कहीं किसी के पास हाथ में टैबलेट, लैपटॉप और बहुत सारी फैसिलिटीज़ हैं, तो वहीं कहीं किसी के पास एक छोटा सा फ़ोन या इलेक्ट्रिसिटी जैसी भी एक्सेस नहीं है।
हमारे भारत में ही बहुत सारे ऐसे लोकेशंस हैं, अनटैप्ड लोकेशन है, जहां वेरियस टैलेंट्स छुपे हुए हैं, बट अभी भी हमें डिसेंट्रलाइज करना पड़ेगा टैलेंट हंट के लिए, ताकि हम ऐसे नायाब हीरे को तलाश सकें और उन्हें निखार सकें फॉर द ओलंपिक्स एंड मेनी अदर इवेंट्स।
The young people, they are usually cast aside saying that they are not enough experienced or they don't have the ability to make a choice or to give opinion on important matters. Our opinions are not given enough value in order to make this change, the grand change. But we are the youth, we are the next generation.
पीयर प्रेशर के कारण बचपन से ही अननेसेसरी कॉम्पिटिटिव इन्वायरमेंट में स्टूडेंट्स को रहना पड़ता है, जिसके कारण मेंटल हेल्थ उनकी बहुत डिस्टर्ब होती है और वेरी टेंडर एज में, एडोलेसेंस एज में सुसाइड जैसे कदम स्टूडेंट्स लेते हैं।
Hello, my name is Lara Boujaber and I'm from Lebanon, and we're gathered here today in the Arab Adolescents Forum in Tunisia. We were discussing several things. Some are limitations. We don't have data in our region, and this is a very irresponsible and very devastating and disappointing point. So, for that, we request data and youth engagement and research in order to have tangible resolutions. And for that, we discussed some recommendations on several aspects that hopefully we can attain them and we have them as tangible resolutions. So, as for participation and interaction from youth and in their societies, we discussed several things. Some of them is that we request quota for women representation as well as youth representation in a percentage in the parliament. And as well, we request to have safe spaces by which people, and especially youth, can go to, can discuss their fears, their emotions, and everything, as well as we need to change the referral system so that we can have a different and quick and tangible resolutions. As for health, we discussed several topics as well as injuries. We have devastating numbers in accidents in the MENA region, and for that, we need to raise awareness and work on programs regarding to car accidents as well as non-communicable diseases, by which lifestyles should be changed, and we need to be careful about our health and take care of our mental health as well. Mental health is crucial and is a priority, and so for that, programs must be done today before tomorrow. Mental health isn't just any topic, it's the umbrella of everything. So we need to know the difference between the terminologies, we need to know how to cope for stress, for example, which is a basic thing we need in our educational systems to have responsible citizens. These recommendations and many more should be taken held from the organizations and government to be taken as serious as possible from today before tomorrow.
The gaming industry is about to experience an unprecedented shift, and we girls will be at the forefront. We're going to define the future of gaming by transforming it from within. This is our chance to shatter stereotypes and let our strong voices be heard. In a growing number of countries around the world, almost half of gamers are girls, but currently, less than a quarter of game creators and developers are female. Well, we're on a path to change that, to go from playing to learning to earning.
Technology and game development require brain, so boy can do it, you as a girl also can do it.
UNICEF is teaming up with the gaming industry and partners in a coalition to help girls like me develop skills such as coding, social entrepreneurship, design, negotiation, and communication.
If someone wants to be in the industry and they have the potential, the mindset, then they should be able to be there.
The game's about to change.
I'm humble and grateful to just be able to connect and meet with other girls from all around the world.
You think we come from different countries, different cultures, but then you talk and you realize you're all just human and you have so many of the shared passions, same experiences.
Advocacy journey can be a lonely journey, and it's really good to meet other like-minded women and actually share experiences and how they're championing their work in their various communities.
And I think that's why this work is important now more than ever. Climate, reproductive health rights, adolescent girls' rights are all intersected, and we're not living single-issue lives.
Si j'ai une demande, surtout beaucoup, c'est d'inclure les jeunes, surtout les adolescentes, en ce qui concerne la prise de décision sur la santé des reproductions.
I feel like if we saw more representation, not just of women, but of women from marginalized communities, young migrants, young women living with disabilities, we would have a very different kind of policy and we would have a very different kind of culture.
نكتسب خبرات جديدة، نتعرف على ناس جديدة، ناخذ ثقافات جديدة، نجد حلول، كنا مع بعض إيد واحدة نقدر نجد الحلول مع بعض.
There will be a young girl even watching this and she'll be like, oh, I want to be there where she's standing right now. And that's how she'll strive, also helping her community, helping adolescent girls. And yes, I think it's very important. There's real immense power in the fact of you using your voice. Just be you in every room and just do what you are called to do.
Don't let your age determine what you can do in life.
Il faut toujours commencer avec des petits moyens et après on va arriver au top.
You're worth more than you think. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Unite! Rise! Lead! Young people, this is our time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah. Thank you so much for joining today. We are going to present an amazing session, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining to this session this morning. Today, we present a healthy dose of change, reducing harm through youth-driven drug education solutions. And I would love to introduce you to our amazing speakers, as well as the recommended mechanisms for interaction. Today, we invite you all to participate in this session with open-mindedness and respect. So we have in here our speakers, Vongai Charity Deka, Ida Ogutu. We also have Andre Gomez, Nick Kent, and Yula Batel. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining today and for attending this virtual forum at the Global Forum for Adolescents. I will now give the word to our friend Ruby Lawler, who represents Youth Rise. So Ruby, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, and hi, everyone. So thank you, first of all, Sarah, for being our moderator for this session, and thank you all for being here today as well. We're so excited to be part of this incredible opportunity as part of the Global Forum on Adolescents, as part of the 1.8 billion campaign. I also want to thank the collaborators for this session and key partners of Youth Rise, UNAIDS, SSDP International, and Agape Women and Child Empowerment Foundation. So the focus of this session is about adolescents and young people who use drugs, a population that experience extreme marginalization, stigmatization, and discrimination worldwide due to the punitive landscape of drug policies. Adolescents and young people who use drugs are often left out of conversations relating to our health and our well-being, leading to policies and practices that do not meet our needs. Adolescents and young people are also often faced with a drug landscape with which they have been offered very little, if any, effective information and education on drugs. Drug education is a key pillar of harm reduction that must start early on, in both formal and informal education settings, and it is crucial for ensuring that adolescents can enjoy all aspects of their health and well-being. Drug education is currently driven by preventative measures and fear-mongering to prevent adolescents and youth from using drugs. From the limited existing research on the impact of drug education on adolescents and youth, it is evident that this current approach to drug education is not achieving its intended goals. Furthermore, prevention-based drug education has shown that it is not effective at preparing adolescents and young people to make informed decisions about drug-based and harm reduction. This session brings together communities of adolescents and young people who use drugs, as well as service providers and educators who support them, to start a conversation on the need for supportive, age-appropriate drug education for adolescents as a form of harm reduction and a way to reach targets set out in the Sustainable Development Goals 3. You will hear from Ida and Vongai Charity on the perspectives of the drug education they received and their views on the need for change. You will also hear from Andre, Nick, and Yulia on what drug education should look like based on their research and knowledge, and the key things that young people are looking for and what has proven to work. And you will hear reflections from Emily Christie, the Senior Advisor on Human Rights and Law at UNAIDS. And finally, we will close the session with closing remarks from Charity Monterang from SSGP International. So we are honored to be with you all to share our lived experiences and existing knowledge and research about drug education, and encourage you to please put all and any questions and comments you have in the chat and question function so we can bring you into this essential conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruby, for that amazing introduction. And well, now that we are everyone in here, I would like to start with this session. And keep in mind that now we are going to introduce the first batch of our recorded interventions. As Ruby mentioned, these are from harm reduction youth advocates. So, well, you will now see the interventions. The first ones are from Bangay Charity Deka, Ida Agov Ogutu, and we also have another one, which you will also see. So if the team can go ahead with the pre-recorded interventions. And now, as Ruby said, you can also feel free to add all of your questions at the chat group, and we will shortly dip into that.
Student for Sensible Drug Policy Zimbabwe. I'm a former student at the University of Zimbabwe. So today I want to share my experience as a person who used drugs in relation to drug education in tertiary institutions, specifically at the University of Zimbabwe. So I want to acknowledge that there was no drug education at the university except for policies which regulated the use and possession of drugs. So most of the times we were found at the other side of the law, and to avoid being suspended, we would bribe the law enforcement agencies. So it was difficult to survive in such an environment where everything was done in hideouts, and we would put ourselves in danger, even our health. So we didn't have information on where to access services and other things we needed to survive as people who use drugs at the college. So it was at one point when I was invited to a student forum which was hosted by a civil society organization working with people who use drugs in the country. So that was when I get to know that people who use drugs have their rights, and they have their right to health, and there were some initiatives being put forward in order for people who use drugs to access healthy services as well as harm reduction services. So I got interested through the information I acquired at that specific forum, and I started a movement, and I joined Student for Sensible Drug Policy and established Student for Sensible Drug Policy in Zimbabwe. So in Zimbabwe, the education curriculum is not that inclusive, to the point that it incorporated issues to do with drugs and safer use of drugs. So the civil society organizations are playing a very pivotal role in terms of sensitizing people, and we can now experience change in terms of drug use behaviors due to the information and knowledge being developed and shared by the civil society organization. So we would want a curriculum which is inclusive and which incorporates issues to do with drugs, so as for people, especially students in tertiary institutions, to carry on and continue with their education in health despite their drug use. Thank you.
Everyone, my name is Aida Court from Kibra Slums, which is in Nairobi, Kenya. I work closely with the Watcher Foundation, we start for Agape Woman and Child Empowerment Foundation, where we do mentorship, and in that mentorship we do drug education, and in that drug education all we do is try to make sure that the youth are provided with information about drugs use or substance use, and drug education is prominent for providing safe and healthy living. It may which it can also help in making the rise of awareness of community needs. So you may find a community that which is infected. When you do drug education, you may find the government which is there to help in curbing the situation which is in the community. And youth being involved in the drug education, it also helps them in develop strategy for risky situation and empower the youth to make safer and healthier choices. And when it comes to abstinence does not really provide the tool for those who are dependent on the drugs, because you may find that when someone is dependent on drug, all they need is the education to know the triggers that may help them go back where they were, with the triggers that may make them go back to where they were, that may make them go back to be to be substance users again, dependents again. So the main thing is always the education, the drug education, which it fits everybody, and it becomes safe to the community, and it also provides safety to the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the recordings. These were our first two interventions, and as you could see, we have plenty of material to continue thinking about what are the relations between youth and drug education, which is particularly interesting in all parts of the world today. So thank you so much to our speakers for their intervention. And we would like to also bring a question into the table for our attendees today. So in order to start this discussion, I would like to encourage you to start thinking about what was education on drugs like for you. So if you go back into the time and you remember when you were a child or when you were an adolescent, what was that drug education for you, if you have any? And other thing we would like to encourage you to think about is what were some gaps or issues that you encountered under this type of drug education. So thank you so much. You can also have this in your mind. And well, now I will also encourage you again to add any question or concern regarding these two first interventions and the further ones in our Zoom chat. And we will also continue with the rest of the recordings now. So our team can go ahead. And now we are going to hear the second batch of intervention. And this next round are, again, interventions that are focused in the questions on what should drug education look like and what are the key things that young people are looking for, obviously regarding drug education. So, well, thank you so much. We are going to listen now, Andre and Nick and Julia.
Hello, my name is Andre Gomes. I am an international working group member of YouthRise and also work for Release, the UK's National Centre of Drugs Expertise. So I've been conducting a lot of research into youth attitudes and knowledge around drug education and trying to really understand what children and young people, mostly aged between 14 and 20, understand about drugs, how they receive their education, and how this actually works. So there was three big ideas that came out of our research. This was primarily that education is coming in too little and too late. So a lot of the education that is coming in is either being received at an age around usually 14 and 15, which is coming already too late at the times that you've been presented with drugs. Around 59% of people under the age of 15 have been presented with drugs in the UK. Meaning that this education needs to be received earlier. It is also too little, meaning that a lot of the content that is usually delivered is a mass amount that is delivered usually around couple of classes in 1 month, when you could actually be spacing out the education for a more frequent and over the years experience to understand really what drugs do. Now, some adjustments are needed, and this is the second section. These adjustments that are needed need to be relevant to the cultural context that people are using drugs inside. So if you come from an African household, if you come from a religious background that does not usually allow for drug use or is incredibly prohibitive around it, a lot of times schools end up being the only place that this kind of education is being received, you know. So you need to be aware of the cultural context that you're delivering information in. School-based education is incredibly important to understand how drugs are going to be discussed. And a lot of times you need to bring students with you from zero knowledge to a lot, or for some knowledge to a lot. Another thing that needs to be adjusted is for the age of students. And this is where all the different disciplines that cross with drugs can come in. From a younger age, you can be delivering information about drugs' effects on the bodies and the mind and how this could be developmentally detrimental. And then when kids are older, say around 14 and above, you can approach reasons for use, why criminalization exists, what kind of impacts that it has on kids. You can approach it from various subjects, from biology to social studies to politics to any other classes that drugs are touching in. Now, the third point I want to bring is the importance of being real about drugs. And quite often we talk about this scale of abstinence and addiction, and we don't really understand what's in the middle. And this entire section is where a lot of young people are going to be understanding drugs and experiencing drugs. So it's important to not speak just at the extremes of like 100% abstinent or addiction being an inevitable route. We can't just talk about gateway conversations, you know, where use of one drug will just inevitably lead to another harder one and become worse. We can't be reinforcing self-stigma, and we just need to be real about the challenges, the experiences, and what people are going through. Thank you.
To speak. I would like to start by acknowledging that I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation in what is now known as Melbourne, Australia, paying respect to all Indigenous peoples worldwide and acknowledge the disproportionate burden that current drug policies place on Indigenous peoples around the world. So in 2016, I was 24 and studying education at the University of Melbourne. I was struck by the absence of information about how to talk to young people about drugs. As a student of politics, pedagogy, and the social sciences, I'm really interested in why access to all this information is so restricted. And I knew that behind the stigma that drug criminalization perpetuates, many young people use drugs for a variety of reasons. In my country, young adults between 18 and 29 constitute the largest demographic of drug users, but we are systematically ill-prepared to engage with the complex risks and benefits of drug use. So, what is the point of drug education? Should we be teaching about how to use drugs, how not to use drugs, how drugs and people who use them are dealt with by society, and why? Or should we be avoiding mentioning drugs altogether and focus just on building protective factors amongst young people? These are the questions I've come across in my research, education, and advocacy work over the last decade. And as a lover of the social sciences, I think it's important to start with some history. We can trace modern school drug education, at least in English-speaking settler colonial societies like Australia, to the late 19th century. It was intimately entwined with the temperance and abstinence movements of this time, who focused on school education at a time when public schooling itself was a pretty new thing. So in short, the idea of educating against drugs, that drugs are bad or inherently evil and immoral, has been present in our schools from the beginning. It could even be stated that the first generation of the temperance movement's abstainers of tomorrow brought a school-bred bias in favour of prohibition to the ballot box when they were old enough to vote. Here, Jerome Beck theorises that abstinence education, poor understandings of the complexities around drugs, and a misplaced desire for total drug prohibition are key intersecting features of the early 20th century. Young people grow up to be adults, and they take their education with them. The rest of my master's thesis looked at the pedagogy of current Australian drug education, looking at policy and school education resources. I'm short on time, so long story short, I found that key curriculum terminology refers to terms like harm minimization, harm prevention, and harm reduction, taking them from mainstream drug policy and treatment interventions and messily applying them to the business of school education. There are no consistent definitions of what these terms mean in this context, how teachers should apply them, and there's no standardized training for teachers to implement them. Therefore, in the absence of clear pedagogy and training, and under the pressure of dominant social discourse, teachers will usually revert to abstinence education, despite research and policy increasingly acknowledging that this is ineffective. I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers, but I do think there are some important themes we can draw on that exist in contemporary pedagogy. So that's the art and science of teaching. It's what we learn in a teaching degree. So in constructivist pedagogy, teachers are encouraged to build, above all else, critical thinking skills. In this environment, drugs are not good or bad, they're complex. Their complexity is to be dissected from a multidisciplinary perspectives across history class, politics class, science, health, and even language classes. This emerging pedagogy has been trialled in Canada, where the Centre for Substance Use Research has developed a curriculum based on the notion of drug literacy. In terms of what I call substance-specific education, so how to use the drugs, how to avoid risks and harms, and how to maximize their benefits, I believe at the moment that this education is best delivered in peer-to-peer contexts, drawing on the philosophy of harm reduction. Peer-based harm reduction services must be resourced and actively promoted and accessible to young people, especially young people who use drugs. I'm lucky to volunteer with Harm Reduction Victoria's DanceWise program, which provides this education to young adults who use drugs, and we're currently exploring ways to increase access to these services for young people under 18 who use drugs. Finally, I'll just speak briefly to a pilot project that I worked on called Smarter About Drugs, which involved a 4-week unit of work in Year 11 Civics and Legal Studies classes. We used case studies to understand drug policy, drug policing, media discourse, and access to health and education services for people who use drugs. An independent evaluation by RMIT University found that this project facilitated open discussion, facilitated critical thinking, increased capacity to search for more information or evidence, encouraged participation in broader discussions and debates, cultivated more empathetic responses to drug use, engaged otherwise disengaged students, enhanced teacher-student relationships, and enabled more open discussions with family. We need more projects and evaluations like this, and we need to conduct them longitudinally over time to see how this kind of education influences drug use trends as children and young people grow into adulthood. Perhaps then we'll start to find ways to safely and sustainably live with drugs in our society, because they're certainly not going anywhere.
I speak here today as a representative of Students for Sensible Drug Policy International, a grassroots network with chapters in over 30 countries across the world. The international community has made key commitments to ensure the welfare of youth in relation to drug policy. The UNGAS 2016 outcome document highlights the importance of educating young people on drug use, offering equal opportunities for us to be able to lead healthy lifestyles. The 2009 Political Declaration and Plan of Action equally emphasized the commitment to invest in and work with youth in a range of settings. Our organization has been grateful for the opportunity to contribute and provide input to high-level multilateral discussions as a result of this commitment. We particularly welcomed the reference made by UN bodies such as UNODC to our peer-based, youth-led drug education program, Just Say No. Today, we wanted to share further insights on what this harm reduction-based model has achieved in line with the aforementioned policy documents. In this way, we hope to further encourage policymakers to actively support and implement drug education initiatives that can empower young people from all walks of life. Our representatives in the United Kingdom have worked together with other local charities to train students in harm reduction, first aid, and stigma. They built accessible educational resources and provided clear information on available services in the areas. Students became fully trained peer educators that were able to share knowledge with some of the most vulnerable youth groups in the area, including asylum seekers and teenagers that have been in contact with the criminal justice system. During workshops, young people became educated on a wide range of life-saving tools, from overdose prevention techniques to needle and syringe exchange. They got the opportunity to ask questions and receive answers without judgment or fear of punishment. They got to learn and bond with their peers, and as a result, our UK representatives saw a marked increase amongst participants in awareness of drug risks, harm alleviation tips, and available services. Most importantly, this peer-driven approach to drug education made young people more willing to seek help and support, as well as support and educate one another. Based on this experience, we urge stakeholders to engage with drug education initiatives built for and by youth, and therefore actively foster peer-to-peer support, community mobilization, and evidence-based harm reduction. We specifically call for resources to be allocated towards vulnerable youth populations that traditionally have been marginalized and subject to punitive responses that lack compassion, as well as genuine potential for rehabilitation and social reintegration. Students for Sensible Drug Policy International is keen to further share insights based around own drug education efforts, and we look forward to collaborating with stakeholders and building on current international commitments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I do believe that we all share that those were amazing interventions. So thank you so much to all of our speakers. It is incredible to have these spaces so we can start discussing new methods, new ways, on new concerns regarding youth and drug education. I do believe that I would like to highlight some particular points in here because, well, as we already heard, all over the world we have different concerns regarding youth and drug education and school education as well. So thank you so much to all of our speakers today. I think that a key point that we shared during all the interventions was the importance of recognizing that school education is crucial in all of the places of the world, so youth can have incredible tools for harm reduction and so they can also build their ownership regarding this situation. And well, it's also important to share the knowledge to the most vulnerable key populations so they can acquire these life-saving tools. And in this sense, I would like to invite Emily Christie, she's here with us today, to reflect on the efforts of youth-led drug education. And we would also like to discuss a little bit about how do these fits into the HIV response as well. And we can also discuss a little bit about adolescent well-being and how can we support youth leadership when it comes into drug education programs. So thank you so much, Emily. It's all in you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers today. I have the unenviable task of trying to do a bit of a summary and response to what have been some incredibly rich interventions and discussions already. As pointed out by Sarah, these are really important to the HIV response. A study this year found that around 23% of people who inject drugs are under the age of 25. And so when we're looking at HIV and HIV prevention, this is a really core group of people that we need to make sure have access to education information, harm reduction services, peer support services, in order to ensure that people can protect their own health and that of their communities. Research that UNAIDS did also found that in last year, the prevalence of HIV amongst people who use drugs is around 7 times higher than that of the general population. So we're still seeing a much higher prevalence, and we're also seeing much higher incidence still every year amongst people who inject drugs and people who use drugs more broadly. I think it's very difficult to sort of go across everything that was discussed and how it's important to HIV, because all of it really is. One of the things I found interesting is that a common thread across everything we're talking about is this issue of criminalization and the backdrop of criminalization. So being able as a teacher to provide information in schools that is real, that is based in the evidence, becomes a lot more difficult when you're talking about something that is criminalized. Being peer support networks, providing information, even providing needles and syringes, again, once it's criminalized, becomes important. So making sure that these conversations happen together around how do we find alternatives to criminalization, and then, you know, remove the barriers to providing the services and the education is really quite critical. And I think the points that Bongai raised around the impact on her and others of the punitive policies that drove drug use underground and into unsafe environments was really critical to paint the picture at the beginning, paint the scene of what we're coming up against. And we had Bongai and Andre really showing that the current mainstream approach to promoting abstinence only for adolescents and this protectionist approach we see still across a lot of policies for adolescents really doesn't work and doesn't respect the rights of and the agency and autonomy of adolescents and young people, and doesn't engage with the nuances and the variety of people's experiences when they are taking drugs. And I want to also highlight, you know, Ida, Nick, and Julia talking also about the youth networks and how they are supporting each other to implement harm reduction in education and to tackle stigma, and to show what happens really when communities do lead and engage, as we heard in the last one, in multilateral spaces. And actually, for World AIDS Day this year, the theme for us is let communities lead. And I think the word let is incredibly important here. It's not build capacity, it's not empower, it's just make sure that the space and the environment we have supports what communities are already doing and puts them in the lead. There's so many funding shortages, there's policy and regulatory hurdles, there's crackdowns on civil society, but communities are already doing such amazing work, as that we've heard. It's more about creating that space for that work to flourish that we really need to make sure continues to happen, so that all the communities and groups that we've heard today are able to keep doing what they're doing. I also want to end just by commending PMNCH for bringing everyone together today to promote a rights-based approach to drug policy for young people and really championing the voice of young people who use drugs. And of course, UNAIDS is always committed to continuing to work with young people who use drugs and realising the right to health. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily. It was amazing to hear that those incomes from you. And well, now that we have a little bit of more time, we're going to continue with the questions and answers moment. So I would like to encourage you again to place all of your concerns or questions, anything that you would like to share, any thought regarding all of these topics over our Zoom chat, and well, the platform chat as well. In this case, I would like to start the questions and answers with one particular question that I would like to invite our speakers to answer. I was thinking about my own personal life, and well, when we're young, sometimes it's very, very difficult to access to information that is evidence-based, of course. So we always reach out to persons that are closer to us, our friends, some family member that is closer to us. And obviously, this information, at least on my end, wasn't easy to access. And the complexity of school education, I do believe it's something that we can take advantage of to provide some tools and knowledge to young persons who are in really need of drug education all over the world. It doesn't matter particularly where. And I would like to invite Julia over to answer this brief question. So, well, when was the first time that you hear about drug education at school, for example? Or do you remember when was the first time that you discussed this situation or this topic at school?
I think that is quite an interesting question, because I grew up in Romania, where I at least in the part of Romania that I lived in, which was one of sort of like the poorer, less developed parts of Romania, we didn't have as many opportunities for even both informal and formal educational sessions around drugs. And I know that at least the kind of drug education that is done in Romania by the national agencies tends to be very much fear-driven, and it doesn't include any sort of harm reduction tips and actual life-saving information. So for me, actually, my introduction to drug education came ironically when I started volunteering and leading the UK chapter of SSDP International during my university days here in the UK. And when we started the volunteering program, Just Say No, in our local community, that's where I also joined peer education sessions, and I've sort of learned more about first aid, what an overdose looks like. So my drug education was quite late, and it was very much facilitated by having sort of these communities, this sort of drug reform communities led by youth in my university, and because otherwise I don't think it would have been as accessible to me. And it definitely wasn't until I was 20 years of age, which was quite late to be exposed to this kind of information. And I had to navigate my first year of university, freshers week, and we all know how those particular circumstances can make people particularly vulnerable to problematic drug use or potentially dangerous drug use. And not having had that information for an entire year of university was I guess disheartening. But yes, I think I learned a lot as part of Students for Sensible Drug Policy International, and I think it highlights how important it is to encourage community organizing and peer-to-peer education as much as possible, and especially how important it is to also look at sort of democratizing access across sort of different regions, different countries, given that at least where I was from, that sort of like educational culture, even within youth networks, isn't as prominent, isn't as present. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for your answer. I think it was amazing. So we can start linking a lot of our main topics discussed during the recordings. And thank you so much. It was amazing to hear about your experience at Romania, because as Andrew was mentioning too, the backgrounds we have, they also determine some of our boundaries in order to access to the knowledge, no? So when it comes to speaking up regarding complex topics such as drug use, sexual health and reproductive rights, for example, or any other topics that we encounter and face during, for example, our elementary school, or even later, no, high school, etc. These are topics that youth is also always discussing. It doesn't matter if we are from Catholic background, or if we are living in Middle East or in Latin America. People are always discussing the youth concerns, no? So in this case, I do believe that it's something very, very important to think about when it comes, as you said, to democratizing this access to the information globally, no? In many of the countries, we are also facing a lot of stigma, and I think that youth is not willing to approach to older persons due to these inconveniences, no, with mind topic related. And in this case, I also would like to continue with the questions we have on our chat. I can see here one that says, and I would like to invite Andre to answer this one. One of our assistants is asking, what measure can government put in place to help young people when it comes to drug education?
There are several. I think two that are quite important would be to consult with young people that use drugs or organizations that represent them. Because a lot of times you are speaking about a population without their actual participation in it. So quite often, I mean, that just helps to have a bit more of a realistic approach towards it. And I think often this may be a bit more complicated to put in practice, but it is providing safe spaces for the discussions of actual drug use. So this was something that came out of some discussions that we had, and the ways that that young people were suggesting to do this was that smaller classes with smaller groups that are able to talk about their personal drug use, that it isn't just one teacher telling a group of 30 people about how drugs are controlled and their harms, having a bit more of a backwards and forwards process between the group that is there and the actual person teaching that class could be really interesting to explore. But also having sort of targeted discussions that smaller groups can have around potential drug benefits, drug harms, reasons for use, social impacts of drug use would be an interesting way of getting these points of views to be discussed without people actually having to disclose their drug use. So yeah, creating an environment that's safe for people to disclose their drug use and consulting with the community, I think, are two really important policies that can be put forward by governments, but they can also be led from the bottom, from schools and children requiring these commitments. It doesn't just have to be from the government.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I also shared this thought that the information should not always come from the government, or that the spaces are not always provided from them. I think that, as you said, approaching consultants and directly young people who use drugs, and for example, women who use drugs, and other organizations that are daily working on the field, it's something very important when it comes into creating proposals on how to measure this. And I can also think about what Nick mentioned earlier, that, well, as when it comes to, for example, colonized education, we also need to think that the experiences we are recognizing today are the efforts from youth-led organizations. And in that sense, well, many of these proposals are always coming from peers-to-peers training or from youth-led organizations. And I would like to ask Nick about, for example, when you, Nick, started your research, was it hard for you to find this information, or how did it start?
That's a good question. My research in school drug education in Australia kind of intersected with my experience with SSDP Australia, like joining SSDP Australia. So yeah, it was a very like special experience for me, actually, like meeting the people that were setting up SSDP Australia in 16, sorry, and saying I was really keen to help out and being really interested. It was actually at the point where I was due to decide what I wanted to do for my master's research. So it all just kind of was kind of like right place, right time sort of thing for me. So I agreed to help set up SSDP Australia and set up one of the first teams at the University of Melbourne at the time where I was sort of looking about how to set up my research. And also for me, I mean, as a young person at the time, a young person who uses drugs and sort of thinking about my whole professional journey, obviously you're dealing with a lot of like self-stigma there. So I had to overcome a lot of like self-doubt and kind of, just like many kind of institutional barriers to even like having these conversations about wanting to ask the questions. What I found was that, a lot of those barriers are either sort of in your head or like kind of easily overcome when you do have the supports around you and when you do have the I guess drive to do so. But yeah, it was very much the kind of networks that came together around the establishment of SSDP in Australia at that time that linked me up with mentors and people who could help me find resources and stuff like that. Just very quickly, I'll mention one of the data sources that I used in my master's research was a survey of school principals from, I think, about 2009 or 2010 that was done by what was then called the Australian National Council on Drugs. And that survey data was publicly available, so I was able to use it for my master's research quite easily. Well, technically publicly available. It was a public report that was done by that council, but that council was actually defunded by one of our conservative governments at the time, and the website, and it was actually really difficult to even find that report. And so it was actually through my networks with SSDP Australia that I managed to kind of get in touch with the people that were running the council at that time, and were actually able to they had the PDF like on their own computer, but it was actually really difficult to find that information publicly for whatever, because the council had been defunded. So little things like that meant that I was, I guess in a pretty privileged position to be able to do that research. So I'm always forever grateful for the people that helped set up SSDP Australia for kind of giving me that opportunity. And I think I just echo Julia's point around the importance of these organizations and the importance of community organizing, and the importance of good mentors in this space to be able to support you to overcome the stigma and to look for the evidence when it's not always immediately available.
Thank you so much for that, Nick. Yeah, I also believe that these type of programs allow us the opportunity to improve our critical thinking as youth and as young persons. So in this case, thank you so much for all of your participations today. And now we are running a little bit out of time. And thank you so much, everyone, to continue waiting here with us. I would like to invite Charity and Ida to answer the following question. Based on their experiences, I would like to know, because we have also some few questions over the chat about how can we best support our friends and peers who use drugs? What would you say regarding that? What are the best methods, or what has been the best chances you have to speak to a friend who uses drugs and to get to know their concerns? Who would like to go first? Ida, is that okay?
Okay, so what I think, how we can support our peers or those who are on drugs, it's we need to love them and accept them in the community. We should not stigmatize them, and try to give them the right direction that they need to have, like,
I think that we are missing Ida. So just let's continue with our next question. Give me just one moment. Okay, so, well, I think that we unfortunately missed Ida, and we would like to continue directly into the next question. I would like to invite Charity to answer this question as well. So how can we best support some friends who use drugs? And also, what are the key points for the Agenda for Action for Adolescents at SSDP? We would like to take a little check into that. So Charity, could you please help us?
Okay, thank you so much. So in terms of supporting our peers, I think we need to develop education materials so that we can disseminate information that can help them. Even we really have to sensitize the general public because they don't have that information in terms of how to support people who use and inject drugs, especially in Zimbabwe. The message is like there is a war between people who are pushing for harm reduction and those who are saying of total abstinence to drugs. So we would want to educate the general public to see the issue of drugs in a different perspective in terms of its complexity, that it needs multifaceted approach in order to address these issues. So we really need to educate the public so that they won't stigmatize people who use and inject drugs. And as peers as well, we have to create safe spaces for our peers so that we can engage and discuss some of these issues together so that we can find a way forward and drug use won't be a challenge in terms of pursuing even our careers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so well, I think that we are unfortunately at the end of our session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It was amazing to hear these incomes and to hear these amazing youth-led projects. We also are always inviting you and encourage you to continue working with your friends, to continue discussing this with your family and with any other person. And if you need so, for always reaching out to help and to always look for these opportunities we have all over these amazing projects. Thank you so much to the Global Forum for Adolescents 2023 and thank you so much for all of our speakers. Have a nice day and an amazing evening.